This is Kat Klingensmith with Retro Crime. This crime scene sounds like the beginning of a British whodunit. In 1907, around 10 p.m., a couple of boys found a horse with an empty buggy walking around in circles at the intersection of 5th and Minich in New Philadelphia, Ohio. The boys went to investigate, and inside the cab they found the body of a beautiful blonde 16-year-old girl. She had been shot in the head and got caught in the reins when she fell, which is what was causing the horse to go in circles. From a couple of blocks over, they heard yelling and found a 48-year-old man on the ground in a pool of blood. He had also been shot in the head. The official ruling was, and still is, murder-suicide. The 16-year-old girl was Arline Knisely. She was born in New Philadelphia in 1891 to parents who were first cousins. It seems like half my episodes involve first cousins marrying. So, warning, don't marry your cousin. Your odds of being in a sex crime go up to 1 in 2, I guess. Don't marry them for other reasons, though. That's how that family in Kentucky turned blue from all that inbreeding. Arline grew up in New Philadelphia, and the closest big city is Akron, which is 50 miles away. When she was a teenager, she ran off to Pittsburgh to be a star on stage. I have no idea why she thought Pittsburgh was the place to be, but it explains why she wasn't successful. She lived with her older half-sister Grace while she looked for her big break. There was an ad in the paper for a traveling theater show. Girls wanted, no experience necessary. 100 years later, ads like that sounded more like models needed, no experience necessary. Arline ran away to be a star and instead was trafficked under the guise of a female minstrel show. When they would arrive in a town, they would go behind a curtain. It would only be raised a couple of feet so the men could just see the girls' lower legs. One by one, men would bid on them. Arline must have had the nicest ankles in town because the bids on her were outrageously high. In fact, they were so high that the man who bought her, he was a saloon keeper named Frank, he paid so much that the show let him keep her for good. So this creep just bought her. He was possessive, he threatened to kill any man who looked at her, and he cut off her hair to make her less attractive to other men. When Arline went to the police about it, they accused her of cutting off her own hair for attention. Grace found Arline, and she charged the manager of the show with abduction. Grace brought Arline back with her, and Frank didn't take it well and wrote Grace threatening letters demanding Arline back. Arline got out and moved to Akron to sell tickets at a movie theater. Now, I was surprised to find out that there were already thousands of movie theaters in the state by 1908. It was already the #1 form of entertainment. And if you've seen movies from 1908, I would have preferred being taken out to dinner. Her bosses were co-owners Charles Spach and his friend Robert Stuve. Charles became pervertedly obsessed with Arline, and for over a year, Robert told him to knock it off. Not only was Arline only 15, Charles was married. His wife lived in New Philadelphia while he and his son John moved to Akron to run the theater. Arline seemed fond of him. He hung out with her every opportunity he got. He was also possessive and chased off men who showed any interest in her. Sounds a lot like Frank, right? Meanwhile, Arline was in a relationship with John, who was in his early 20s. Things became strained between the two, so she tried to commit suicide with carbonic acid, but didn't succeed, which I'm guessing means she didn't try very hard because a little goes a long way with that. It burns the body from the inside out. After her attempt, they reconciled. In early June of 1908, Robert fired Arline and sent her back to her family in New Philadelphia, thinking that that would fix the situation with Charles. It didn't. Suddenly, Charles had to return to New Philadelphia, too, because his wife was sick and needed help. After a whole year, he suddenly had this caring, attentive husband. 2 weeks later, Arline decided to return to Pittsburgh. I would have been terrified of my old, owner tracking me down and enslaving me again, but it sounds like Arline wasn't safe from men no matter where she went. She may as well go to Pittsburgh where at least she has a sister looking out for her. It seems like her sister was the only one who ever looked out for her. Charles didn't take the news of her leaving well and begged her desperately to stay. On June 19th of 1908, she packed her suitcase for Pittsburgh. Charles was distraught and began drinking early that day. He rented a carriage and picked her up to go on an evening ride. That night after dark, which on that day would have been around 8:45 p.m., there were reports of 3 gunshots along with a woman screaming. Both Charles and Arline had been shot from behind. Next to Arline was a .32 caliber revolver with 4 empty chambers. She had died instantly. A couple of blocks over, Charles was yelling, "I've been shot!" Before he slipped into unconsciousness, he said that Robert did it out of jealousy over Arline. The physician who arrived on the scene said that it was homicide. There had been a third party there. The angle that they were shot at made it impossible for it to be self-inflicted. The police followed up on Charles's accusation, and there were some holes in it. Robert had been out of town the whole time. His wife had passed away a few years prior, so his son lived with his in-laws in Cleveland. He went to visit his son, spent some time with a female acquaintance, and returned home Saturday morning, which was well after the time of the murder. The hotel and train employees vouched for him. Charles was sent home to recover. His poor sickly wife could take care of him. Instead of recovering, he took a turn for the worse and had to be moved to the hospital for emergency surgery, which he died from. Prior to his death, he confessed, "Oh no, 'twas I who killed Arline and tried to kill myself." Except that was impossible. According to the physician who arrived on the scene, the coroner, the physicians attending the autopsy, and Charles' personal physician, the wounds could not have been self-inflicted. Their investigation was extensive. They even needed more time, and Arlene's family didn't listen and had her interned, so poor Arline had to be exhumed in order for them to continue their investigation. At the end of it all, the coroner's report determined that it was homicide caused by, and I'm quoting directly here, insane and unwarranted jealousy. The police investigation was also thorough and showed that Charles had threatened Arline before. The worker at the stable where Charles got the carriage that day said that Charles was drunk and told him, "Hurry up with that rig, I'll get that girl and end it all." They saw that as a threat to kill her and himself. The official conclusion in the police report was a murder-suicide caused by jealousy. So who was right? I'll lay out the facts again, and we can play detective here. We have a beautiful young lady who had been trafficked and sold to an abusive, possessive man, then rescued, and was found killed from behind by 1 bullet in the head. The gun was next to her with 4 empty chambers, but 3 shots were heard. An intoxicated, much older married man who had been her boss, was the father of her boyfriend, and was publicly obsessed with her to the point that his business partner had to forcibly separate them. He was found a couple blocks down the street, also hit from behind, and named the assailant as the person who had tried to separate him from his obsession. He named a man with an airtight alibi. What sounds to me like the most likely scenario is, and this is what I'm imagining, someone snuck up from behind and either didn't know how to load a gun or was a bad shot or both, shot them, then tossed the murder weapon and ran off on foot, while Charles, who had survived the hit, also ran off, either out of fear or to get help. He named a person from Akron who knew both of them and named him as the assailant. But the person who shot them was on foot and somehow knew where they were going to be. Someone who knew the roads, like a local. Robert lived in Akron and he was from Germany. Even Germans don't know how to be in 2 places at once. Charles was lying, either out of spite or he was lying to protect someone. It's called the eternal triangle. A is married to B, who is in love with C, so A kills C. And I can't blame her for killing B too. His wife only lived 2 blocks away from where they were killed. In 1908, those blocks were called Sergeant's North Addition. They were still undeveloped lots. According to Virginia Evans, a girl who heard the shots, it was too dark at night to see who was out there. The police must have figured this out. They would have at least questioned his wife because at the time, most murders were matricide. A confession was enough for the police to close the case. Why keep it open? This is the early 1900s. There was still a moral code people believed in called the unwritten law, which means that if someone dishonors the integrity of my family, I can avenge them. Of course, most murders were by men, but it still applied that if Ethel steals my man, goodbye Ethel. When Charles said he was going to end it all, I think he simply meant that he was going to take Arline out that night and convince her once and for all to stay. He wasn't hiding his feelings if he was day drinking, since he and his wife were both at home. He wasn't going to work at Akron. She would have wondered why his soul was so tortured. I mean, all my husband has to do is breathe out a certain way, and I know something is on his mind. When wives are worried about their husbands, they become these master gumshoes. They'll always find out when they want to. I think Mary Spach found out. I don't think she knew Arline was only 16. The press kept reporting her age as 19. Only a small local paper in old-timey German got her age correct. It said almost 17. It was quite the chore to read German with archaic letters and expressions. I haven't lived in Germany in over 20-some years, and even then, we didn't speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Arline is buried with her family in the local cemetery, along with her sister Grace. Grace lived into her 70s and then died when her clothing caught fire in her home, which doesn't sound like Grace deserved because she was the only one in the world who ever protected Arline. Mary died in her 70s. All three of them are buried together in the local cemetery, the same one that Arline is buried at. They're buried with their infant that died in 1894. This book may as well be closed as a murder-suicide because Mary lost her whole family. Grief is enough of a prison. For some bonus epilogue, after his dad died, John put out an ad in the paper looking to hire someone to keep his mom company. Poor John. He died at 26 years old. He had only worked at the rail yards for a couple of weeks when he slipped and got run over by a train. He was conscious for a few hours afterwards and asked them not to tell his mother because she was so unwell. When they told her, she had a nervous breakdown. So no husband, no kids, and her parents had died a long time ago. She spent the rest of her life living alone without even an obituary. And who knows what Arline's fate would have been if she had survived. Her little sister died in a mental hospital in 1962, having been there for well over 20 years. She died falling out of bed. So again, public service announcement. Don't have kids with your first cousin.